Welcome everyone to another Art Clinic Online this beautiful Saturday morning. We have an incredible artist and presented by one of our favorite collaborators, we'll call her host, Adah Bitterbaum. She has the incredible gallery in Kensington, which I'm hoping that maybe she'll tell us what's a few of the exhibitions that are coming up in the near future. So, but she'll do the introduction for Miss Lindsay Mueller. And we are grateful to all of our supporters these past couple months with the Bruns honey. We did raise quite a bit of money to support our cause moving forward into 2025 even. So we're pretty excited about that. So thank you to all of our donors. And
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And without further ado, I will pass the baton to Adah, who will tell us about our artist today.
Hi, welcome everyone, and it's so exciting to have Lindsay in the gallery today. Because of my technology or lack of technology, it's always easier for me to have her here. But anyway, I don't know Lindsay that well. We met each other at her MFA show at American University, and I was just so enthralled with her paintings. They were really, really exciting for me. And on her website, she has a link to an article at AU, and one of the quotes from that was texture as piled up experiences in her paintings. And that was something that I felt immediately, like there was this sense of archaeology and anthropology and layers and nature. And we've all had amazing connections to nature during COVID, post-COVID. So I was immediately drawn to her paintings. And then she invited me for a wonderful studio visit, which was really wonderful at AU, just as she was exiting the university. So I'm so delighted to have her in the gallery this morning. And she grew up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, not far from here. And she was a joint psychology and art major at Boston University. She's taught a lot. She continues to teach a lot. She's worked in a senior living setting, teaching art classes and being the administrator of that program, which I actually got to visit on Friday. I'd never been there before. It was wonderful. I was amazed at Goodwin House in Alexandria. And so she's going to tell you a lot about her art. And thanks so much for being here this morning.
Yeah. Okay. So should I start by sharing my screen? Hi all, thank you for being here. I'm excited to be here as well. Let me just let's see. Okay. So everybody can see my screen, right? Everything's okay. Okay. So I just wanted to start by saying that this is just the image on the left. As Adah said, I just graduated from AU this past May. So just for reference, I kind of am in a transition point in my life. And so I'm going to show some work during this talk. I'm going to show some work, a few things from undergrad that I think I've been thinking about in my practice lately. And then some things that I think were pretty influential in my grad experience. And just kind of trying to lead into what I'm trying to make now, what I'm thinking about making as I move forward from grad school. This picture on the left, I did a residency this summer in Pennsylvania, and I wanted to include that here because I think right now I finished my thesis, so I finished a larger body of work, and I kind of feel like I have a lot of new things in progress, and I just wanted to start the talk by highlighting that. Something else I'm going to bring up in my talk is I guess some other artists that inspiration artists, things that excite me. Just to, I think, try to provide some more grounding for my work and show, what I'm thinking about in my practice. And hopefully that helps provide some context for what I'm making now. So I just wanted to start with, this is an artwork by Fern Coppage. She's a Pennsylvania landscape, impressionist painter. I grew up in Bucks County area of Pennsylvania, and I worked for 2 summers at the James A. Michener Art Museum in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. And I feel like I got to be surrounded by a lot of these wonderful Pennsylvania impressionist painters. And this was an artist that when I was an undergrad meant a lot to me, just thinking about how she was using light and color in her work and how things could feel like she was painting from life for sure, trudging out in the snow and painting, but how, just how she was experiencing color and translating that. I think that had a big influence on me. Oops. Oh, it stopped. Oh, there we go. sorry. This is another painting that I really liked in undergrad, and I was thinking about, I've always really liked paintings that feel really dark and deep and kind of have like a drama to them. I mean, this painting, I think, was one of the things I love is that like the figures are basically like blended together, aside from like the man is a little bit more warm with the red versus the green, like the Viridian or whatever is in the woman's dress. And like, but I really like paintings that feel like they have this like swirlingness, this drama. So I feel like these painting, like Edward Munch was really influential to me in undergrad. I've always really loved the work of Lois Dodd. I mean, I think this is just like such a stellar painting, but like the fact that you can make a whole space out of essentially just green and white, I think that this is so impressive. And I think a lot about in my work, like how color can play a role and like how there can be subtle little nuanced areas versus then high contrast areas. And I just love the mark making in this too, like how it really like creates the space. Yeah. And one other artist I'll show that I was really looking at, and I still look at these artists as well, but I think it was really helping like shape me as a young artist in undergrad was Claire Sherman's work. Just like how slippery and piled on top the marks are. And a lot of her paintings feel like they both feel like fast, but in like a very fluid way and like building space. And in this one, I'm really drawn to, I love like dark paintings. I think I'm really interested in like the ambiguity it creates and like how, I mean, especially these ones, like how this paint is all sitting on the surface, yet it creates this like deep space. And so, yeah, I just wanted to start by sharing, these are some artists that I was really looking at and stuff when I was first starting out. This is a painting I made in I think it was like the winter of 2018, 2019. So this would be my first, sorry, what am I saying? My final year in undergrad. And so to give some context, like what I was making at the time, I was painting mostly from life, but I was painting from life in a way that I would like try to challenge my perception. So I was often like turning the lights out sort of, or turning almost all the lights out but one, and trying to like mix the colors in advance and then paint from life, like looking out the window and trying to make it darker so that my eyes could adjust and I could see more. I think it was mentioned that I also have a degree in psychology, but I've really always been interested in perception. I also think like I've always been interested in landscape and how, and I like ideas of sublimeness, but I have some issues with like, I'm not necessarily always a huge fan of like grand vistas and like overabundance of landscape and all of these things that kind of lead to people like taking advantage of landscape, like land and stuff and overuse. But I am interested in like, you know, like how we attach romanticism to landscape and like, I guess, yeah, like how we can paint something like in this case, I was painting this from life, but also, excuse me, like subjectivity comes into it because like I'm trying to use my perception, but because I can't see that well, like inventiveness starts to come into play. And so that was something that I think I still think about in my work. This is another painting from around that time. I was also painting, like I liked painting a lot of ephemeral things. So like, and also like things that were kind of markers of humanness or human life in landscape areas. So this is just like snow tracks essentially of some people walking through snow and it piling up and melting down. And like, I mean, basically it's painting shadows. And it's somewhat more abstracted how I did this here, but I think also in a lot of these like snow paintings I was doing, I was thinking about like time passing and like how like you can kind of like accumulate markers of time through like through things like footprints in this case. And formally I've maybe it relates to like Claire Sherman's work, but like really interested in having things be like smushy on the surface of the work. These are two more paintings from my last year of undergrad. And like I said, like I was interested in how people like mark their place in landscape. So the painting on the left, for example, was a painting of tire tracks that kind of suddenly emerged near the BU Bridge, actually. So somebody got in a bad car, I mean, I don't know if car accident, but at least like went off part down the hill. And I could see that from my studio window. And I think it, like, I would just kind of notice a lot of things that I'm like, oh, that was a shift. Like, that wasn't here before. And it marked something that had happened, even if I wasn't a witness to the thing that had happened. I found it interesting to kind of track the remnants of that. Especially on the one on the left, like snow filling it in, kind of burying over the, you know, how this land was carved out by tire tracks. But that also kind of like illuminates it more. Yeah, so, and I included this one on the right too, because I think I'm thinking a lot more now about fluorescent colors in my work, but I feel like that's one of the first times I really have like a stark fluorescent color against more muted background. Yeah. So now I'm gonna shift to some more recent works. And let's see. So these are from, I guess, between my first and second years of grad school. So like I said, I just went to AU for my master's from 2022 to 2024, like this past May, and I just graduated. And in between these other undergrad works I showed in now, I was making other paintings, some good, some bad, but I mainly wanted to pull out some that I think really had a lot of through lines to me still in my practice. But in these work, I think I was still thinking about like human markers of change and like a desire how to like mark space and how we like subtly affect our environments. So these are paintings of bark carvings on tree bark, if hopefully you can tell that. And I think bark carvings in particular really interest me because they get into like a few ideas that I'm interested in. I've done a whole series of paintings with these carvings, but one, I really like the idea that they're very time-based. Like they kind of feel like journaling or a diary entry. Like it's something that you've marked a space and it'll change, like the tree will continue to grow after that, maybe cover back over it, but it's definitely like marked in a specific time. It also feels a little bit endearing in that people are usually doing these because it's kind of like a marker of love often, or at least trying to like assert some sort of presence, which has like a little bit of romanticism to it, but it also is kind of sad that it's damaging, like it's harmful to our environment. Like this isn't good, you know, we're like asserting control, not control, but maybe it's like an over assertion that on on trees. And so I think I'm interested in them for a lot of those reasons. And then formally also just like how it's like something else being drawn on something, having to contend with the surface that's under it. Yeah, and so the way I was painting these, I think this is also when I started to get into using more fluorescent-y colored paints, like the bright green, and trying to make it so that the marks and drawing on the surface is closer toned, harder to discern, hoping to make it feel complicated and complex, whereas then there's this like more bright flash that's happening in the periphery that can kind of suggest to the viewer that like you're really affronted by this being really up close to you, but you still may not fully understand it, and something is happening outside of it as well. Oh, and the last thing I wanted to note, these are on panels as well, and I'm noting that because I think I mean I have painted on canvas before, and I still paint on canvas at times, but my preference is to paint on like a firm, harder surface. I think. And I'll get into later some more of like the material shifts I've made in my practice. Now I'm working like a little bit more sculpturally with the paintings, but I do really like a harder, firm surface to paint against. Let's see. I wanted to show this because a lot of the work I'm making, I'm inspired by I like going to local parks, like roadsides, walking. I mean, honestly, it's like walking around. So it's fairly simple in that it's like my daily commute. But I also, I was more of a runner growing up, and now I run for fun. So I run very casually, and I stop and take pictures of things and like look at things when I want to take a break. But there is like some parks that I feel like I run through often, and I still get to, while going through them, notice like shifts. Even a tree I was drawing in the springtime, it got cut down over the summer. So I realized that recently. I was away for like a month and a half this summer, and I was like, oh, it's gone. Okay. But I wanted to show this to show like, these are some, like, this is a tree that I've painted a few times, like the bark carvings on it. And then this is a painting from it that's like fairly direct in its translation. Let's see. And I think also this was starting to shift into, I was getting frustrated with the flatness of the paintings, and I was thinking a lot about like how, like, you know, carvings on a tree and a lot of things too, like there's all of, in landscape, there's all of this textural density that's part of the experience, that even if it's not color, like that's part of what makes it so complex and so rich and depthy. And I was feeling frustrated with the flatness. I had done some other like plaster experimentations before this work, and some were better and some were worse. But I think this was a piece where I was really starting to get into like, okay, like how can I make this kind of plaster base of the work that is carved into and is like accumulating this information from landscape, but also is doing it in a way that supports the painting on top of it, but also isn't so one-to-one that it becomes like that's all you think about. Like I had done some experiments where it got a little like theatrical and trying to like carve the tree and then you paint the tree, and then it starts to get into, I feel like actually looking at it like, oh, did the bark match the carving exactly? And it's becoming too much of that rather than this felt like a way to accumulate information. And when I say information, I'm thinking a lot about like in some of the earlier works, it was a little more vague. Like I was trying to make carved marks from some pictures and like some bark texture. But then in some later works, you'll see I'm using like shadow patterns and other types of patterns that you can see a lot in nature. Because I think it kind of, I'm hoping to convey like some of that experience of when you're in a space, you can get all of that information, but it doesn't all have to be like depicted out in little tiny marks. It kind of can create the atmosphere of the experience is my goal. But yeah. And I like though that this could make the work, it kind of had to contend with the surface of it more too, which I just think is interesting because then I'm not painting on something that's blank necessarily, but it kind of has the painting itself, like the marks that I'm making have to deal with something that's already existing, which I also think relates a little bit to thinking about like humans' mark and position in landscape and like how we affect things, just kind of like ideologically. Let's see.
Lindsay, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
How do you like grapple with illusionistic texture versus actual surface texture? Like, how do you decide when to do which?
Oh, that's so yeah. So I think that's kind of been a learning process and something I still feel like I'm learning. Because okay, so I feel like at first I have some paintings that feel a little bit, I guess like campier, or I don't know, like they started to get like I was like, okay, yeah, like I'm gonna create the tree. So now I am creating this and I'm painting it. But then I feel like it almost just became too much about that then there wasn't much beyond that. I think it kind of depends on the area, and at times like coincidence is involved. Like I don't know. I have a painting I'll show in a few slides where I have like a close-up of this rocky area. Maybe I'll can I address it in like a few minutes more?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, cool. Because I think that might be helpful. Because I think I'm hoping in some of the work you'll see, like it's kind of handled on a case-by-case basis. Like at times I'm trying to mimic a texture, and so I really will mimic the texture. And at other times, I feel like I'm almost like fighting against the texture that I've put underneath of it. And then it's like a different struggle that's happening on the surface. And then sometimes I have to like amend the surface underneath because I'm like, okay, this is not working. Yeah. This work. So yes, once again, it's still in that series of like bark carvings. Around this time, I was also thinking about the edges of the work a lot. And I was thinking about like, how does the painting exist in the gallery space and like kind of like butt up to everything else that's around it. Like if I'm having all of this texture on the surface and I don't know, I was thinking a lot about creating like these sort of like crafted organic objects. I do like if my paintings feel like they're handmade. I mean, of course, all paintings are handmade, but I want them to feel like they're crafted in a sense and that they do have human touch. And I think I'm hoping to convey some level of care through that like touch. so that they feel like they're organic, but it's clearly like a homemade, handmade organic, not a true organic object. Yeah, and I think some of these little ones that just feel like such a tiny little motif, they feel like little landscape fragments, which I enjoy. Let's see. Oh yeah. So around this, like all at the same time, I was also making larger work as well. This is a painting that I made in my first year of grad school in, I think, the spring. And I think this work felt important because I was starting to take more liberties with color. And I also, around this time too, I stopped painting as much from life. I kind of waffle back and forth. Like now, sometimes I will paint from life. And a lot of times though, I don't. I'm using more like images and drawings to help inform the work. But I think like I was feeling a little frustrated with always having to find exactly, especially for larger spaces. Like this was kind of on a roadside and I really wanted to paint this space, but I was like, I don't think that this is super feasible at the time. And yeah, so I think this was a big painting for me and helping me get into being able to like make larger work in the studio, not from life, using using multiple images and stuff. And yeah, just taking like being a little bit more artificial and heightened with the colors as well to suggest some level of like artificial lighting in a somewhat natural space, but it also starts to bridge into like magicalness a little bit, I think. Let's see. And yeah, trying to infuse definitely some like drama and energy into this space. Like a lot of the places I'm painting, it kind of starts from at least like a personal narrative interest. Like this space, I was really interested in it because it felt somewhat mysterious. I hit a deer here, like unfortunately, and the one had like come right out of here, this space, and I obviously was not expecting it. But I think certain things like that kind of were like a trigger make me start to think about like what else is happening here? Like what can I see? Like what's existing past the surface that I can't know about? And I start to like build narratives for places, but they're kind of ambiguous, like vague narratives because I can't really define it. And I think that's similar in my interest in some of these other like human markers, like the bark carvings and stuff. Like I can sense that there was a story there, but I maybe can't have access to the whole thing, and that spurs some of the interest. Okay, okay, I can answer your question better with like this painting, I think, Jordan. So basically, on some of the larger work, I also started to add plaster to the surface. And this was a little bit more of a feat at first because it was, I mean, realistically, it's a lot easier to work with plaster on a smaller scale than a larger scale, even just because of drying time and other things like that. So this is like a panel that I built that I basically, yeah, added plaster on top of and like kind of painted it on to get different textures that I wanted. And then I sealed it in and oil painted on it. But like this, I guess, is the example I was thinking. Like in some areas, these rocks, they're really flat because that, I mean, and it's kind of a product of how I first applied the plaster. Whereas I was really interested though in the bottom area, how the bottom right, like it's not necessarily depicting a rock exactly, but I think it's capturing more like the energy of rockiness. Like it feels like it has that crustiness. I had a studio visit with Darrell Gibbs in the spring, and we talked a lot about like trying to capture like capture the essence of how something feels, not necessarily just like what it looks like. And so I think I've been trying to use that a lot to inform how I'm sculpturally building things up. Like what helps me, yeah, capture how this feels or like the atmosphere of a space, not necessarily like this space had a leaf that went here, so I built a leaf because that also kind of feels like an impossible task. Yeah, trying to like match the energy more. Yeah. And I like too that I feel like the plaster, like even though it's kind of heavy, I think in some of my pieces I've actually felt like it can really add air to a piece. I don't know how, because it definitely makes things feel like weightier and heavier, but I think it's like a more ambiguous way to add depth. Which actually, yeah, it feels like gives some level of air. And then And I've enjoyed too how like the pieces can cast shadows on themselves as well. Because then they're kind of like, yeah, they're responding to themselves in a way, which I like, because they're becoming their own little like fragments of landscape. I also,
Lindsay, quick
yeah.
question. When you're kind of doing the prep work, do you have, like, for instance, in this painting, do you have the surface built and then you decide the imagery, or is the imagery decided and then you build a surface with the image in mind? I guess kind of a chicken or the egg situation.
Yeah, yeah. I think so for this one, oops, sorry. For this one, I definitely knew that I wanted to paint this on top of it. Also, and I think this is important to note too, like, so I started this painting last fall and finished it in like January. All to say that this is still something like fairly new to me. So I'm still figuring out the answer to how to do things best. And I think that's like what I've been trying to figure out this summer a little bit. And I hope to, you know, work on for at least the next year or two. But like this one, I knew that this was like the image. I have a drawing of this actually, that this is based on a drawing. And so I knew that this was like the image I more so wanted to create. I feel like usually I have at least a vague idea of the image, because that kind of helps guide me. Not as much. I'm going to show some process pictures in a little bit. And so that can kind of show how I'm building things up, but especially for the edges, like sometimes actually in the piece, I'm going to use a pattern or something, and that's just going to be what the surface is. But I also can be aware that, oh, if I want to paint this one space on top of it, like, is that going to make any sense with this pattern? Like, so I try to be like aware of that at least. But some like now I'm working on more things at once, like more mid-sized works at once. And some of them I have definitely known what I want to put on top of what. And then there's like one or two other ones I'm working on right now that I'm like, oh, you know what? This will so match this. And I feel like it's more just emerging on its own. So I'll be curious to see like how that develops over time. I wanted to just like break to show another artist that I've been thinking about more lately. This is Lucy Kim. She was one of my professors when I was an undergrad at BU. And I really liked her work then too. Like I remember she gave us a lecture on her work, and she was like casting people actually. So she was using like casting and then kind of flattening it and then creating paintings on it and like using it as a way to connect these kind of disparate things like human form and then painting these objects. And I thought it was interesting at the time, but I think especially in the last like, it was more honestly this spring that I started thinking about this work again. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder if I've been subliminally thinking about this. And I just, yeah, I think she's really like smart and making cool work. And she has some different like printmaking work that she's making now. But I think I just wanted to show this as a way that I think this is something I've also been thinking about, like kind of creating this initial surface and then something else has to like contend with that on top of it. So I wanted to share this. And also, like over the summer, I was looking through some like Hervin Anderson work, and I was thinking, because sometimes I'm putting fluorescence in my work and I'm like, oh, like they just feel like they make sense like this, like flash. And I was looking at him like, look, he's doing this in so much of his work too. Like, of course, fluorescence belong in landscape. So that just felt exciting to see, and I just wanted to share that. So these are some larger works that I made in the spring. So these were in my thesis show at AU. So it's basically there's plaster and paper clay under the surface. And like I said, like these were relatively newer materials to me, so I was still learning. But so just to like show the process more. So first I built this large panel, like I did build them myself. And I think I knew that I wanted like an image in this realm on top of it. I have a drawing of this actually. And so I kind of had that idea. And when I was creating the edges of the work, like areas that stuck out, I was thinking about how that would relate to the image itself, the drawing I had done. But then as far as the actual surface texture, I was looking at, you can actually see the little like leaf shadow patterns over on the left side. And I essentially was like doing like really low relief, but with paper mache to like carve those in. And then some areas I would build up a little further. It's tough to tell how deep things are on here. Some areas are like an inch or two deep. Others are like less so. I mean, some are actually more than 2 inches, like especially on the edges, it's like 3 or 4. But And then I was taking like a tinted plaster and kind of glooping that on and painting it so you can see brush strokes in that, which I like, and kind of using it to create this surface. And I've liked it as a surface. It feels both like firm to paint on, but also textured underneath. I mean, sometimes it is frustrating, like a really textured area, and I want to get a really smooth mark, and I think it's really challenging me as a painter. And then sometimes I am a little frustrated and stuff, of course, but it's also, it kind of makes me have to be open to more chance, I think, happening as well in the paintings. Like I can't perfect them as much. And then, yeah, so on the right side, you can see my multiple different colors of tinted plaster and how I kind of like unified everything through that process. But underneath it was this like paper mache. And even I think at the top, you can see how like it is more just real like paper mache of pieces of paper that I ripped up and stuck on. I also, some of the areas that are more built out, like along the bottom, I used pieces of wood and like nailed them in to create like a firm structure underneath. So there's a little bit of that as well. Does that answer your question a little bit more?
Yeah, it totally does.
Okay, cool. I'm like, I hope I answered it. Yeah, okay, thanks. Yeah. Yeah, and so yeah, you can see, so I'm using this to, I've also been, yeah, like I said, building shadows into the work. I think shadows are really interesting to me as like this ephemeral thing that it exists and it's very much a part of our experience of space. Like, I think that, like, yeah, a big part of being outside is like light and shadows, and that's how we experience it. But that's actually something that you can't really, it's a little less tangible than other things outside. And so I've been thinking about ways to like build them into it, like through these processes.
Lindsay, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
This is Mariana. Hi,
Yeah.
thank you. I have a couple of questions. One is these are incredible, really,
you.
really inspiring. Thank you. But have you thought, I imagine that as you build a surface, you're building, and tell me if you're going to say it later, so I'll shut up. But you're building it with layers of probably polymer, right? Like more of a more acrylic based stuff to glue the plaster and to keep it in place.
Yeah, I used let's see,
and
go
then
ahead.
I have another question.
Go ahead. Or do you want me?
Sorry, no. And also, how do you sort of reconcile the part about paints that are fluorescent, which depend on an unstable bond that doesn't make them permanent. In other words, they will decay over time because that's what gives them their fluorescence. And I know manufacturers are marketing them like crazy because they can make a lot of money. But I caution my students against using fluorescent colors because of that reason.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so the first question, I'm actually not, like in this one, I'm not using acrylics. Well, no, okay, I am actually. Okay, let me think. So I have the paper clay, like paper mache, then the paper clay. I have PVA, kind of, I use that to seal.
Yeah, that is a polymer.
Yeah, and that's why I'm sorry. I was trying to think of like, and then after doing the plaster, because I didn't want the oils to absorb too much into the plaster surface, I did use clear acrylic gesso, but I haven't used acrylic paint. I don't think this one, but I am using acrylic paint, some of them, you know, underneath the oil. But also I'll say, I'm saying fluorescent, but like this actually, like, okay, the little green leaf over on the right side, it's cadmium chartreuse mixed with a little bit of what is it? One of the other greens. Now I can't remember, but
Green gold or something.
Yeah, so I guess I'm not actually using like true fluorescent paints. I'm just trying to make it look fluorescent. But I am curious, like I do want to do some experiments because I know you can buy fluorescent pigments and even like make your own paints from them. I know though that then it deteriorates, and so that's something I'm thinking about and I kind of want to experiment with. But I think but in some I also think I don't know if any of these, but like using a little bit of fluorescent acrylics So I think hopefully it holds up a little bit better in an acrylic body over time.
It does not, because it's the pigment that is evanescent. It doesn't matter what the medium is, unfortunately, is what I understand from the chemistry. I'm a physician and I tend to love looking at the chemistry of things.
That's good. Well, yeah, so that's good to, so I've been yeah, okay, well, that's good to know. Thank you. Let's see. Yeah, or like in here, I'm trying to create a more like heightened color effect, but I wouldn't say any of these are necessarily fluorescence, but I'm also trying to use like, hopefully the ground of what it's against can help emphasize it. Even if I go back to like this one, like, I think it's starting to feel a little fluorescent in areas, but it's all just basically like cadmium yellow, cadmium chartreuse. It's a lot of cadmiums, honestly. But
Thank you. That's
yeah,
great.
of course. Let's see. So I'm just trying to think. But yeah, and this is another painting that I did at the same time. I think with a similar process. So just to show, I'm not going to like go into like the same breakdown, but it basically used a similar process and has a similar like surface texture as well. Oh, and this I don't know if I said in this last slide, but I was trying to show like what the surface itself actually looks like up close and how the paint in some areas, like I really enjoyed how thin the paint got in this area and really felt like brushed on, like you get all of the little recessed areas. So in this area, I liked it. In some areas I get more frustrated and I end up just like globbing thicker pieces of paint on to kind of cover over. And so I think you can see that a little bit at the bottom too, but I just wanted to show that. Yeah, okay. I think I only have a few more things. Sorry, I'm talking a little longer than I meant to. This is a smaller tree carving work, and I just wanted to include this because I was still kind of also working on these at the same time. You know, lots of things are happening at the same time. Yeah, and I think I've been thinking about ways that I can use paint differently in different pieces, meaning that like here I'm, I think, more clearly depicting the trunk of this like thin tree. Like I'm kind of like more direct painting that, whereas in others I do think I'm using more like layers of paint to build like atmosphere, and others it's more, yeah, like I said, like atmospheric or about mark making. And so I think I'm trying to think about how different like strategies of painting can exist in the same work too. So that's something I've been thinking about lately. A few more things. Something else that's felt really important in my practice in the last 2 years is drawing. It's become, yeah, a lot more important. It's also just really helped me, like, I think digest spaces, especially since I'm not working from life as much more. I can go draw in a space or I can draw from photographs too, but I think it helps distance me from spending the time, this like the same way you'd spend time in a space painting from life. It helps me think about how I'm spending time and like what am I really gravitating towards, or like what is special about this that I can get to. And that's so it's been helpful. And some of them I think turn out really cool as drawings too. And so I've been enjoying them as their own thing. And some feel like more of a vehicle for getting to the painting. So it's both, but yeah. So at my residency I did this summer, like I feel like I got to do a lot of drawing, which was really nice. Even just like some of the ones in here, I was just tracing shadows and light patterns essentially, which felt, yeah, exciting, and thinking about ways that I can incorporate that in my paintings. So I have some newer paintings that I've been trying to put that in. Let's see. Oh, I wanted to show, so these are just 2 other studio shots from my residency I did this summer, just to show like what I was working on. I have some newer little paintings over on the right side, and then some bigger things in progress that I, I'm plastering and stuff. Now I'm back home, so I'm working out of my like apartment for now, at least for a little bit, and kind of I've set up my whole little space. I have my little area carved out and my walls and stuff. But it was really nice having a studio this summer here, and this was my first time doing a residency, so I really enjoyed it. Yeah, okay, I think this is my last real point. Something that's like somewhat newer in my practice is I've been experimenting with using metallics in the works. And so I'm not sure fully how to explain this yet, but I like it. Like I've been interested in referencing like gold, silver, and thinking about how those relate to natural things like the actual minerals of gold and silver, but also how it relates to like connotations of value and human value, things that we place on like value that we place on things and we hold dear to us because yeah, so I think like I'm trying to show some level of care, I think, through silvers and golds and these metallic paints, but also thinking about, I guess, like not gems, but geology a little bit. Like I did also in the last year, I always love going to like the natural history museums. Like, and I went to the one in New York too, and like seeing all of the gemstone sections and stuff. So I think I'm thinking about that as well. But yeah, and so in that same vein, there was like a drawing this summer that I made that I added gold leaf to. So I'm still figuring out how to do that properly and like what role that has in my practice, but just something that I've been interested in. Of course, the picture on the right is not necessarily a great picture. It's more trying to show the reflective quality, but I just wanted to share that as well. Yeah, and I think that is basically my talk. Let's see. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see.
Thank you, Lindsay. It was great. Yeah, I had a couple of questions just about the ideas that you're kind of playing with, and I always think like what are kind of side or tangents from those concepts, and you're very materials driven, working with the supports and building out from that, and that from what I could tell, like these are all very normal and archival supports. But whenever I think of nature, like nature is this kind of evolving, it's growing and that deteriorating and kind of falling apart. And there's that time lapse, which you're kind of alluding to with the idea of layers. And I don't want to be like sending down this journey of like making unarchival things on purpose, but there is that kind of idea of, yeah, like nature dissolves, it falls apart. And, that was an artist talk last night, and she was playing with cardboard, knowing full well that this is going to fall apart. Is that something you're kind of thinking about at all? Is the idea of permanence in work and letting go of not necessarily the future of colors, but like having the painting evolve alongside nature? I don't know. I don't explain that well at all.
No, you did. And actually something I think I thought about a lot in undergrad, and that some of these things that I was like, I think part trying to like hold on to things. It felt like, oh, like there's these like little fleeting things that I feel care for and I'm really interested in, and it's gonna go away. Like, how do I hold on to this and make it semi-permanent? I mean, paintings aren't permanent per se, but like semi-permanent through this way of like marking it down. And I also, similar to, I'm really interested in the like just journaling. I also journal actually, but also as a concept of how, like, if I'm writing in a diary, it kind of locks in that emotional state of a day long term, that even if I change my mind on something or change my position, that's still like how I experienced it then. And so I think that it's interesting having something kind of be like locked in that state in which it was found. Of course, like painting isn't forever permanent. Like, who knows, maybe acrylics won't do so well in a long time. And like, but I don't know. So I think I kind of from like a trying to like hold on to everything standpoint and like save things in a sort of precious way, I think I like them to feel like they're going to last. But I also, yeah, like then they can, like, especially with plaster, I think that's forced me to think more about like how will these, break down a little bit, even just realistically, like I'm transporting this really heavy thing and I accidentally broke a little piece off, like, oh man, so I'm thinking about that more, but I don't think I necessarily want them to be like fully ephemeral. I kind of like the idea of them like holding on to ephemeral things in a more permanent way.
Lindsay, I have a question too, and please open it up to everyone for questions. But have you tried to do acrylics also, since the underlying stuff that you do is glued with acrylic or polymers? What's your thought about doing oil versus acrylics, or even combining them, as one of the people you referenced does?
Yeah, I think I've avoided acrylics a little, and I really like the fluidity of oil paint. Like I said, I really like mushy paintings. And I know I guess if you work really fast with acrylics or use some sort of like slower drying agent, you can kind of do that. But yeah, I mean, I really like oil paint. is the truth. But I have been thinking about ways that I can use acrylics a little bit more strategically for potentially like color pops or translucent layers underneath. The only thing too, though, is I don't want to get into a state where I'm already kind of having to do things in a step-by-step way. And I don't want to force myself to over plan and like over regulate like how I'm doing it, because then I think it takes some of the like fun in the process away. So I think there's a painting I started this summer that I did all of these like shadow tracings on the surface, and I just did them in acrylics because I did it outside. So I just like took it outside, found shadows, traced them all. I did use fluorescent acrylics, so we'll see how that turns out. But luckily it's underneath, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, but like that it felt like, okay, that made sense for that painting. So I think I'm kind of also reacting on a like case by case basis, but
Good for you. And the acrylic inks, for example, might be something that it's fun to play with, since they get in the crevices easier than what you could do with oil, perhaps. And how long does it take for big pieces to dry for you?
Oh, great. Well, also, I'll just say real quick, I really like the acrylic. So that's actually one thing. Some of my pieces do have acrylic metallics on them that I'll do beforehand, before the oil paint, because the acrylic metallics I found are better than the oil metallics.
They're wonderful, yeah.
Yeah, so that's actually, yeah, I could have said that. And then what was
How long they take to dry?
I mean, okay, so I think it just depends on how thick certain areas get. But like I was kind of struggling with some of the thesis works. Part of it was it took me longer to do some of the paper macheing and plastering at that scale than I expected to. Like those ones are about 65 inches tall, I think. And it was just like physically it took a long time. And then the paper mache is one of, I think, the slowest drying things in the process. If I do it too thick, and I've, been hair drying it and stuff. That I think like it's been really helpful for me to work on many different things at the same time, because just like drying times and stuff. I mean, some of the thicker oil painting, I don't know, like it can be like touch dry within like hopefully like a week or something like that. But like some of them you can still like smush them a little bit. But yeah, Barbara, I think you posted something, right? Let's see.
Yeah, and I have this question in person also. I was thinking about shadows and how you are interested in them. And in my chat also, I just wonder whether you've thought about the lighting of the uneven surfaces to create organic shadows that are actually part of the preparation.
Yeah. So I've actually really been wondering about that, like how dramatic lighting could contribute to the work in a gallery setting, like spotlighting, things that add like other ambiguities just in the physical space. So I actually have been thinking about that. I definitely wrote like a exhibition proposal or two kind of with some of that wording this summer. So I don't know, but yeah, so I'm thinking about that, but because I don't fully know the answer necessarily. I was also I didn't include these, but I was making these kind of like tent paintings in the last year where I was using pieces of nylon and like polyester. I was thinking about how shadows get projected onto tents. Like I go camping and stuff like that. And even just like umbrellas, like if you're out on a patio or something. So this kind of thin fabric that captures these shadow patterns, but in a really graphic, flat way. And then also though, how if that fabric's warping, that also affects what you're seeing. And so, yeah, but I was making some of these like shadow paintings on like thin nylon in the last year, some experimenting. And I did try to light some of them from within too. And it was not exactly the real goal, I don't think. But so I've been thinking a lot about lighting. I just don't think I've come up with the right answers yet. But hopefully.
Your work is wonderful, how it evolves, and it's fascinating. It was a great presentation. Thank you
so much. Yeah, there's a lot of things like I said, like I'm still learning a lot too. So I'm hoping that things obviously I'm hoping things keep growing. I'm optimistic, but yeah. Yeah.
Lindsay, can you talk a little bit about, we haven't had a whole lot of people just right out of MFA program before, but can you talk a little bit about how AU kind of formed or shaped you as a painter?
Yes, formed or shaped me. Sorry, I missed the last word.
Shaped you as a painter, like
as a painter. Thank you. Okay. Sorry, I got to yeah. Yeah. So I think something that was really good. that I liked about AU, and this is something I was like looking for with grad school too, was like being in a space where it wasn't just in a painting program. I also feel like BU, I mean, I really liked going to BU for undergrad and stuff. I feel like BU gave a lot of, like, it was a really strong foundational painting program, but then also like there was a lot of other contemporary references. We had great visiting artists and stuff. But I really liked too for AU, like I wanted to be in a space where people were working more interdisciplinary, and just engaging in different types of practices. Yeah, I mean, I think AU was really helpful in that before I went, I had been thinking about ways to make my work more sculptural and expansive. I think I was getting a little frustrated with like the flatness of some of my paintings, and it just didn't feel like it was like accomplishing my goals exactly. And I had tried to I had taken like baby steps into trying to make things a little more sculptural, and I mean, these are not very like good experiments, but they were experiments. And I honestly, I just think AU was really helpful too, to just have like feedback, like consistent feedback from a lot of people that understood like what I was trying to do and were able to offer like, oh, like this is working, or you just need to like be more bold or like braver and like just take a bigger step. And I think encouragement really helped too. So I think that really helped shape like how I'm working now. Like I really enjoyed like my professors there and stuff. And I feel like a lot of them, like I still have good relationships with, which is, I mean, I know I'm very recently out of school, but like I'm still like talking to them and stuff, which is really nice.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Have you ever used any like real twigs and things like that to mix with your plaster and other things? Have you thought about it? I don't know if it's a good idea or not. I'm just asking.
No, I've thought about it. I think, I mean, I don't necessarily feel opposed to it, but I also don't feel strongly for it either. It doesn't feel necessary, so I haven't necessarily done it. Because I do know some painters that will like I said, especially at Boston University, there's a lot of landscape painters there, and I knew some of the grad students that like part of their practice was like mixing in like clumps of grass and stuff like that, and it really becomes like integral to the surface of it, and it becomes part of it. But I don't know if I need that. Like I kind of like how I'm replicating texture, but then it's through this like human-made lens. But that said, I was making some weavings a few years ago during COVID. I really wanted, like I said, I was trying to learn like more sculptural practices.
Right.
I was teaching myself these things via like YouTube and stuff. And I taught myself how to weave, and then like in there I was using like natural elements and kind of like adding them in. And that's something I'm still interested in, and I hope in the next, that's like a 5-year goal, is to figure out how that maybe integrates or relates to my practice. I'm not really sure, but I think that was kind of my initial kind of steps into working in I mean, weaving is flat still, so I think it relates to painting. I was trying to make pictorial weavings too, so I was trying to make things like shaped and stuff.
Yeah.
And so it relates to painting, but it could expand out of that. And so I think that was kind of helping me bridge into what I'm doing now.
I see a residency in a sculpting environment for you in the future.
Cool. I'm interested. Yeah.
Because I have friends who are sculptors, and they certainly are kind of envisioning some things like you're envisioning. So I think they would benefit from you, and you might benefit from them too.
I think that's been one of the toughest parts of the last year or so, is there's been a lot of stumbling blocks of like learning how to use materials correctly.
Right.
A lot of this, like I don't have a sculptural background, so it's, I mean, the cool thing about AU is very interdisciplinary and stuff, so I could ask people for material recommendations, but at the same time, I still then had to learn how to do along and write, and so I think that's been something that has felt slow over the last year, but I'm hoping that the more I learn about materials, that will be good for me.
Absolutely. Well, you're going in a fantastic direction, I think.
Yes.
It's great. Any other questions, comments? Oh, there's someone in the chat. Let me.
Great talk.
Well, great talk.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really wonderful, and we'd love to have some of your work on exhibit.
That would be amazing.
At Gwineco.
Are there pieces of yours on exhibit at Adah's gallery?
Oh, I didn't actually. I got distracted. I mean, this one, yes.
Right, that's right. You brought it close.
So if people want to see your work, they can go to Kensington, right?
Yes, yeah.
Cool.
Yes, exactly.
I love how in that one you can see the thickness of it and the borders of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this one, like, I mean, the surface has a little texture, but it's actually a
Thank
little
you for
flatter.
bringing it
Yeah, it
closer.
This one,
Thanks,
it actually
Adah.
has paper embedded in the surface too, which you're not really gonna
Oh,
see. But
beautiful.
Yeah.
I like pressed it into the no,
Right.
I use paper mache. I use paper mache. Sorry, I was trying to think.
And do you make your own paper mache or do you buy it?
That's a great so that's I've been
Ah.
buying it because I've been being a little lazy, but I know that I can make it. I think
Well, why not?
Point
Why not
compound.
buy it? I mean, I'm not critiquing you.
Yeah, no,
Make it
no,
easier.
it's more just every time I order it, I'm like, I should make this myself. Like I think I need like joint compound. Like I don't know. I was looking it up online. Like I
Right,
can't really
joint
do it myself, but
or air dry clay. I was thinking all along while you were talking about it, I have to
Yeah.
ask my sculptor friend whether.
if you have any recommendations, so this summer I ordered some new materials that I've been experimenting with. Some different like kind of like air dry clay type. I got Magic Sculpt, I think it's called. So
Right. It is
Yeah.
air dry clay, exactly. I've been learning about clay
Epoxy
because I
clay.
have a sculptor friend who we're gonna carve in a sorrow head.
Oh wow. Oh cool.
Yeah, like we decided that with my students and this person who's a sculptor, and we're gonna try it. But this is with regular clay. It's air dry in the long run. It dries, but it's not air dry like the quick drying.
Okay.
So I don't know.
I know people
but-
have asked me about like ceramics. I also think that too, I'm trying to not over expand myself too
Right,
quickly that
right.
I'm overwhelmed.
Good for you. Yeah,
but
good for
I'm
you.
hoping that my life is nice and long and I get to like experiment with things over decades. And
Right.
Yeah.
Good for you. Well, thank you. This was fantastic. And Adah, Rose, do you have any upcoming artists in addition to Lindsay? And you want to tell us about it?
Thank you. Yeah, I have an art opening this coming Friday, the 13th.
Right.
And it's the 13th anniversary of the gallery, which is
Oh.
and her name is Gabe Brown, and she lives in the Hudson Valley of New York. And
Ooh.
this will be her 4th show in the gallery. And she's a wonderful oil painter, landscape painter as well, but abstract landscapes. And then in November, we have 2 local painters, Ann Smith and Nathan Loda. Well, Nathan lives in upstate New York now, but he grew up around here. So they'll be in 2 solo shows at the same time in the gallery.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you
so much
so
for
much.
hosting. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And hopefully more of Lindsay when she
Absolutely.
in the future.
Oh yeah, definitely more of Lindsay. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. We've talked about that. Thank you.
That's wonderful.
Yeah,
That's
thank you.
great. Thank you so much. If there's no other comments or questions, we will wrap up, but saying thank you again to both of you. And we will edit the video and it should be up in the next 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah, and I just want to thank you guys. This is a really lovely opportunity. Like, thank you for having me and stuff. And I know, I know, like, because I watch a lot of other videos and people have like more work to pull from and stuff too. And that's in part why I wanted to include like some artistic inspirations and stuff that I have.
Good for
like,
you.
thank you for like allowing me to share what I'm working on, what I'm hoping to learn in the future. I appreciate it.
Well, this was really not only interesting but enriching. So I really, really appreciate it.
And we've had so many artists kind of at, I don't want to say the end of their career, but
Right.
further into their career. So it's nice to kind of see, somebody who's just
Emerging,
beginning
right.
that kind of journey out of the MFA program into the kind of the art world. So it's a good kind of what do you call it? Balance to our
Balance
program. So it was great to have you on.
Exposure to all levels, right?
Yeah, and I want to make sure everyone knows in 2 weeks we have Barbara Gruber, who is a phenomenal painter.
She is wonderful.
A good friend. I've known her for 12 years. Also a Bethesda painting finalist this year. But she is probably one of the most delightful people that I can come up with. So hopefully we'll get her stuff together. She's been Miss MIA lately. But in 2 weeks we'll see you guys again. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the weekend and week.
Bye.
Thank you, you guys.
Bye. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.